My name is Lucas Brady. I'm 36 years old and live in Dallas, a city where the horizons are so wide that the roads seem to take you straight to infinity. Here, spacious streets sparkling in the southern sun fill the space between tall office buildings and cozy family neighborhoods. Here the air is saturated with the aromas of smoked meats simmering slowly on roadside grills, where cowboys, office clerks, and tourists gather in silent admiration of perfectly cooked steaks and ribs at simple wooden tables. Here, cowboy boots are not just a tribute to tradition, but part of the local character. They are worn by both old and young, without fear of the heat or long walks on hot asphalt. I never sought fame or adventure. My life, as it always seemed to me, was orderly and reliable, built brick by brick. I have a wife, Ashley, with whom we have been together for so many years that our habits and views are intertwined like the roots of an old oak tree. Together, we own a small but cozy house in one of the best areas of the city where white fences coexist with well-groomed lawns, where in the evenings you can hear someone plucking the strings of a guitar while sitting on the porch, and somewhere in the distance a ball is knocking on the sidewalk. The children do not want to go home until the last ray of sun. Our neighbors are those we can rely on. They will lend you a lawnmower without any questions if yours suddenly breaks down, or hand you a bottle of good bourbon if the day has been too hard. There is no need to pretend or build walls between yourself and others. Dallas teaches that friendship and simple human sympathy are worth the most. This is exactly how I lived, in the predictable rhythm of days, among familiar streets and familiar worries, believing that everything in my life was strong, like an old Texas oak that would not bend under the onslaught of the wind. My business is related to the installation of smart home systems technologies that make life easier, more convenient, and, as many people think, even a little magical. It's not the most glamorous job. I don't save lives or create works of art, but I do make other people's homes safer, more functional, and more modern. This area is developing rapidly, and the demand for it is growing every year. People want their homes to work for them, so that the lights turn on automatically as soon as you cross the threshold, so that the temperature in each room adjusts to their preferences, and so that the refrigerator itself reminds you when it's time to buy milk. Some strive for maximum convenience, others for security, and others simply want to show off to their friends the futuristic capabilities of their home. Sometimes, when installing another system, I feel a little like an engineer of the future. After all, for many of my clients, their new smart homes look like something out of science fiction, as if technologies that previously could only be seen in films about the distant future have suddenly become part of their everyday life. Modern solutions allow you to control your home from your phone screen, by voice commands, or even using gestures. Smart cameras can not only record video, but also analyze faces, distinguishing between hosts and uninvited guests. Automatic locks open using a fingerprint, and the lighting system remembers the habits of residents, creating a cozy atmosphere in the house without unnecessary hassle. Of course, there are also unusual requests. One of the most memorable orders I ever completed was for a refrigerator. It would seem, what could be special about installing voice control on an ordinary household appliance? But the client, a man of about 40 with an invariably tired look and a good-natured smile, immediately made it clear that the task before me was non-standard. He explained it very simply. I am on a diet. During the day, everything is fine, but at night, my inner demon turns me into an ice cream-eating zombie. He spoke seriously, but there was a note of doom in his voice. Apparently, his battle with nightly attacks of hunger had been going on for a long time, and he, desperate to put an end to it through willpower, decided to trust technology. My task was to make sure that the refrigerator simply did not open after 10 in the evening. As a result, we configured the system so that it responds to the owner's voice commands. If he tried to access food at the wrong time, the refrigerator not only refused to open, but also began to scold him in a mechanical but reproachful voice. No, no, buddy, we agreed. Go to bed, don't eat ice cream. The funniest part came later. A couple of weeks later, he texted me. You created a monster. Now I can't get cheesecakes at 3 in the morning. To be honest, I even wanted to ask if he tried to argue with the refrigerator or tried to outsmart it, but I decided not to traumatize the man with unnecessary questions. Another incident was no less funny. One client, an energetic young man with undisguised excitement in his eyes, wished that his house would turn on romantic music and open the wine cabinet when the girl entered. You see, Lucas, I need an effect. Just like in the movie. Here you go home with a lady, and then oops. Music, the lights are dimmed, a bottle of good wine comes out of the closet. We implemented this quite quickly. The system recognized female voices, scanned the face of the person who entered, and, if it was a girl, automatically turned on jazz or soft classical music, and also opened the wine cabinet. Everything worked perfectly. For the time being. A couple of weeks later, he called me, and there was clearly a mixture of horror and suppressed laughter in his voice. Lucas, this thing almost killed my mother-in-law. It turned out that the system malfunctioned and at some point stopped distinguishing between a romantic visit and a family visit. As a result, when his mother-in-law entered the house, Frank Sinatra's velvety voice suddenly turned on for everyone, the light in the hallway dimmed, and the wine cabinet automatically moved out, right towards her. Having almost hit her on the head with a bottle of Chianti, the woman, apparently, was extremely dissatisfied, and the client had to apologize for a long time and assure her that this was not some kind of diabolical technology launched specifically against her. But perhaps the strangest order in my entire practice was the request of an elderly couple to build voice control. Into the toilet. At that moment, I thought that I wouldn't be surprised by anything, but when I heard this request, I couldn't resist asking. Why? The old man, a gray-haired but cheerful man with a strikingly serious expression on his face, looked at me and calmly, without a hint of a joke, answered, to remind me that I already went, and at my age, this becomes a problem. I decided not to ask any more questions and just completed the order. As a result, the toilet acquired a voice notification system that politely reminded the owner of his last visits. Of course, I was curious how much this really helps, but I never dared to ask about it. Some orders remain in the memory forever, and this is definitely one of them. Ashley is a hurricane in the world of marketing. She is confident, driven, and always seems to be a few steps ahead of everyone else. If she sold ice to the Eskimos, the poor souls would not have a single piece of ice left, but they would leave with a set of premium refrigerators and a subscription to supply more. She values style, the right parties, and always keeps everything under control, as if her life is a delicately thought-out advertising campaign. When Ashley gets angry, her brown eyes flash like danger lights, and her eyebrows rise subtly, betraying her patience, which is about to come to an end. We met 10 years ago evening, noisy bar, the smell of strong alcohol and fried meat in the air, laughter mixed with the hum of voices. I just wanted to order a beer without thinking about anything more, but somehow I found myself right in the middle of a little drama. In front of me stood a girl who could have been mistaken for a movie star, if not for her completely earthly, but at the same time icy gaze directed at the guy who hovered near her like an annoying fly. He was one of those who don't understand rejection, who thinks that persistence is synonymous with charm. Listen, honey, let's exchange numbers, he drawled, leaning slightly towards her. There was too much self-confidence in his voice, and too little chance of success. Ashley didn't blink. She looked him up and down with an almost invisible gaiety, a kind of professional interest, as if in front of her was an advertising banner made without taste or measure. Great idea, she finally said. Her voice was even, but it already hinted at the blow that would fall on the guy in a second, just not ours. Let me write down the number of a good psychotherapist for you. A second of silence. The bar around lived its own life. Someone was ordering cocktails, someone was arguing about the results of a football match. But for this guy, the world had narrowed down to a single blow to his pride. He hesitated, clearly not knowing how to react, either to be indignant or to try to joke further. But the moment was lost. I couldn't resist. She turned him off very effectively. He raised an eyebrow and, before he could think about it, said, "If you want, I can say that I am your jealous husband." Ashley turned to me. Interest flashed in her eyes, quick, evaluative, as if she was mentally flipping through possible options for the development of events. "Oh, well, if only for one night," she answered with a slight grin, "and then you can handle it yourself." And so, through the exchange of quick remarks and mutual pleasure from a well-played scene, our conversation began. I ordered a beer, she ordered something stronger, and we started talking. About advertising, about strange types in bars, about a city in which both lived, but as if they had never crossed paths until that moment. The conversation flowed easily, as if we had known each other for a long time. And 3 years later, we got married. Ashley always knew what she wanted. This was one of those features of her that at first delighted and then frightened her a little. She did not build castles in the air and did not have her head in the clouds. Her dreams were clear, verified, and realistic. She wanted a stylish home with floor-to-ceiling windows, where every piece of furniture was carefully selected to harmonize with the overall aesthetic. She wanted a car that would not just take her from point A to point B, but would emphasize her status and taste. She wanted to dine in restaurants where the names of the dishes sounded like foreign spells, and the waiters described the presentation as if they were not talking about food, but about works of art. I was simpler. My dreams revolved around stability, warm comfort, and that very Saturday when you can take your time, relax on a comfortable sofa with a can of cold beer, and immerse yourself in football without thinking about what to wear or where to go. And so we two people with such different views somehow found a compromise. We lived in a stylish house, but it was cozy. It didn't have the austere sterility that I feared in design magazines, but it also didn't have the clutter that would have horrified Ashley. We drove expensive cars, but to my relief, one of them was my reliable SUV, and not just her elegant sedan. And yes, we went to fancy restaurants, but we always had a sofa and a huge TV, which Ashley agreed to fit into the interior, albeit after long negotiations. Our marriage looked strong. We rarely argued. If there were arguments, they were so mundane that they even seemed funny. Who left an empty ice cream container in the freezer, deceiving someone else with false hope? Who forgot to buy milk, although they clearly remembered that they asked for it? Whose turn is it today to walk Ramon, our dog, who at such moments always looked at us as if we were discussing the fate of the entire universe? Our life was busy. Parties, noisy and luxurious, where Ashley shone, and I often chose the role of observer, listening to other people's conversations and enjoying a cocktail. Trips where we changed scenery as quickly as the playlists in her car. Friends who always had a reason to get together, whether it was someone's birthday, a promotion at work, or just a Friday that it would be a shame not to celebrate. We looked like the perfect couple. People talked about it. Our photographs on social networks exuded prosperity. We tanned on the seashore, we elegant at some charity dinner, we laughing with glasses in our hands. Yes, from the outside it really seemed like perfection. Every Friday I met with friends. It was our tradition, something unshakable, like a good old ritual, proven over the years. The week might have been hectic, plans might have fallen apart, but Friday nights remained the same. It was that rare island of stability where I could be myself without worrying about how to choose the right wine for dinner or what impression Ashley and I were making on others. There was no fuss, no high expectations, just beer, conversations, and the feeling of being among your own. One of my friends is Nick, a former military man whom I have known since school. He was always the guy you could rely on. In our youth, when we didn't have enough money for a taxi after another party, Nick invariably found a way out, either persuading strangers to give us a lift or convincing the bartender to give us another chance on credit. In the army, he acquired even more firmness, and now his calmness seemed almost frightening. This is the person who does not lose his head, even in the most tense situations. He didn't ask why or why if he knew you really needed help. He simply asked, "Where to dig and do you need a shovel?" Coming from him, it didn't sound metaphorical. I'm pretty sure that if I really needed a shovel, say, for reasons best left unknown, Nick would simply bring it, no questions asked. We were different. I've always tried to see the best in people. Trusted, sometimes even too easily. I believed the words if they sounded sincere. Nick looked at the world differently. He was not a cynic, but he had no illusions either. He knew that people do not always tell the truth, that behind smiles there are often hidden motives that it is better not to think about. "You're too trusting," he told me more than once, narrowing his eyes slightly and taking another sip of beer. "But I have less reasons for paranoia," I laughed in response. Work has always played an important role in our lives. She was not just a way to make money, she determined our rhythm, filled our days, dictated our plans. If I could be called a workaholic by necessity, then Ashley was a workaholic by conviction. I worked to live, and she lived to work. Her ambition was something indomitable, almost predatory. Ashley was never satisfied with little. She didn't just complete tasks, she made her way forward, leaving behind those who were not fast enough or decisive enough. Her every movement was thoughtful, every step was precise. She easily understood people, calculated their intentions several moves ahead, and used their strengths to her advantage. It was an art, and she mastered it to perfection. Every year, her influence in the agency grew. Her colleagues respected her, or perhaps were afraid of her. The clients loved it. The management appreciated it. It seemed that success was second nature to her. She knew how to enter any room and instantly capture attention. Her voice was smooth, confident, not a single phrase sounded random. But over time, I began to notice how work captured her not only in the office, but also outside it. Even at home, her thoughts remained there among strategies, negotiations, marketing campaigns, and new opportunities. We could have dinner in a restaurant, and I saw how her gaze periodically went into emptiness. She was not just distracted. She was scrolling through scenarios of upcoming transactions in her head, analyzing, thinking through. "You have no idea how chaotic the office was today," Ashley said at dinner, barely touching her plate. "The client decided at the last moment to change the entire strategy. It's like we have a lot of free time." She took a sip of wine, absent-mindedly tapped her fork on the edge of her plate, and continued. "It's good that Owen took on some of the work himself, otherwise we would definitely have missed the deadline." Owen Carter is her colleague, a senior manager who joined the agency a couple of years ago. I didn't know him personally, but I had heard enough about him. A man with impeccable marketing instincts, he was one of the key players on Ashley's team. They seemed to get along great, and judging by how often she mentioned his name, he was her main working ally. "So, did you get out?" I asked, more to keep the conversation going. At such moments, it seemed to me that Ashley was not talking to me, but was simply saying her thoughts out loud. "For now, yes. But that doesn't change the fact that we're having a hell of a week now. Owen has his projects, I have mine, and then there's this damn client who changes everything every 2 days. Sometimes I think he just takes pleasure in boring us to the point of exhaustion." I nodded, understanding what she was talking about. I myself was also busy. A new project installing a complex, smart home system for a network of country mansions took up almost all of my time. There was enough work, but it didn't bother me. I loved my job, even if sometimes I had to deal with some pretty weird customer requests. "By the way, how are you?" Ashley finally looked at me. "Yes, everything is as usual. A lot of work, but interesting tasks. I'm currently finishing up setting up a system for a client with a very specific sense of humor. He wants the voice assistant to joke like he's been doing stand-up his whole life." Ashley grinned. "So, you literally create artificial intelligence with sarcasm. I hope he doesn't learn to respond with rudeness." "Of course not. Although, if the client changes his mind, I can add a couple of remarks in the style of, 'Are you sure you want to turn on the light? Maybe you should just go to bed." I smiled. "That would work for me," Ashley laughed. "Sometimes I need a reminder that it's time to finish work and just relax." She thought for a moment, twirled the glass in her hands, and added, "Although, to be honest, I don't even have time to rest now. We have a big project ahead. Owen has proposed some innovations, and now I need to push it all through management. If it works, it will be a big step forward for the agency." We continued dinner, discussing projects, acquaintances, and the upcoming weekend. Small details began to reveal changes in our lives. Everything seemed familiar, but something elusive hung in the air, like a vague smell of anxiety that was impossible to ignore. It was as if the room had become colder, although I knew for sure that no one had touched the thermostat. These were not sudden changes, rather slow, imperceptible, but this made them even more alarming. Ashley began to stay late at work more and more often. At first, these were rare evenings when she arrived tired, threw her coat on the back of a chair, and looked at the wall with an absent-minded look. Then her late returns became habitual. Friday night dinners, which were once our tradition, began to give way to her meetings with colleagues. I wasn't being picky, work is work. I myself have more than once found myself in situations where fatigue took the last of my strength, and I just wanted to fall on the bed and disconnect from everything. But if at first she still tried to compensate for her absence, talked about business, tried to maintain our usual rhythm, now her detachment has become a part of our life. At first I attributed this to her workload, but day after day I noticed new details. She almost never appeared at home during daylight hours. If the weekend had once been a time for the two of us, it now felt like we were living in parallel universes. I would spend the day in the workshop working on projects, and when I walked out into the living room, I would see her sitting at her laptop, barely noticing me. She now held the phone in her hands almost constantly, and if before we could safely leave gadgets anywhere, now it was invariably next to her. When I asked about her day, her answers became increasingly shorter, as if each word was difficult for her. It was as if she had fenced herself off with a wall. In the evenings, she fell asleep before me, turning to the wall, and if I tried to hug her, she gently pulled away, muttering that she was too tired. I knew that work could squeeze you to the last drop. I experienced this myself more than once, but something still haunted me. One evening, I decided to prepare a surprise for her. Dinner, her favorite wine, candles just to remind us both that we are not only partners in everyday life, but also people who love each other. She came home late, looked exhausted and distracted. When she saw the table set, a faint smile flashed across her face. "Have you prepared dinner?" Her voice was quiet, almost guilty. "I wanted to spend the evening together, just relax," I answered, pouring wine into glasses. She sat down at the table, but ate slowly, clearly not hungry. It seemed that her thoughts were somewhere far away. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. She looked at me over her glass and frowned slightly. "Long. It seems like I never left the meeting room." I nodded, taking a sip of wine. I decided to try again. "Maybe you can take a day off. Let's spend it together, just forget about work at least for a day." Ashley smiled tiredly, but there was uncertainty in her gaze. "I would like to, but not now. The project needs to be closed." She quickly finished her dinner, thanked me, and, citing fatigue, went into the bedroom. I remained sitting at the table, looking at the unfinished glass of wine. The wind was quietly rustling outside, and a ringing silence reigned in the house. I knew that in her field there were times when work took over, and I wanted to believe that this was just a temporary phase. But inside, an alarming voice sounded louder and louder, which could not be drowned out. I rarely allowed myself a full weekend. Even when there were no urgent projects, there was always something that needed attention: calling clients, updating software, planning new orders. But this time I decided to give myself a day without work, without obligations, just to devote it to what I had long wanted, but did not have time. The morning started slowly. I woke up later than usual, when the sun was already flooding the room with light. I stretched and looked at the empty side of the bed. Ashley is long gone. This was not surprising, but Saturday morning breakfasts used to be our ritual. Now her disappearances in the morning have become commonplace. I leisurely scrolled through my phone, checked the news, lingered on social media for a bit, then headed to the shower. A cup of freshly brewed coffee, avocado toast, and a couple of minutes by the window looking out onto the street was nice. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. While I was drinking coffee, my eyes fell on the list of things that I had been putting off for a long time. Fix a squeaky garage door, replace a burnt-out light bulb on the porch, clear out the clutter of things under the stairs. It would seem like little things, but too many of them have accumulated. Deciding not to delay, I took the tools and got to work. Time flew by quickly. By the middle of the day, I felt pleasantly tired from physical labor. I even liked it taking care of the house, doing something with my own hands without thinking about work. My mood improved, and I decided to continue the day on a positive note. So I headed to the gym. I've never been a fitness freak, but going for a run and doing a few sets of weights helped shake me up. In the locker room, I met Nick, my old friend, who, it seemed, had also decided to have an active day. "Wow, have you decided to take a break from your brilliant work?" he asked with a grin, slapping me on the shoulder. "Sometimes you need it," I chuckled. "Spend a day at least once without thinking about clients and orders. In that case, I offer you another way to distract yourself. How about a bar tonight? A couple of pints of beer, some light conversation." I thought about it. On the one hand, the idea seemed tempting. On the other hand, Ashley will still work late and will probably come back tired. However, if she wasn't going to spend the evening with me, why shouldn't I allow myself to relax a little? "Sounds good," I nodded. "Write the time and place." After the gym, I stopped at the store, bought a few groceries, and headed home. On the way, I decided that I would spend the evening quietly, watch a movie, cook dinner. Sometimes loneliness can even be useful. When I returned, it was already starting to get dark. I laid out my shopping, turned on the dim lights, and sat down to check the security system when I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. The camera at the entrance periodically turned off, recording incomprehensible gaps in the recording. Perhaps it was a normal glitch, but still something inside me latched on to this fact. We'll have to sort this out in the coming days. Trips to Ashley's parents have always been something of an obligatory ritual. Her family lived in a cozy house a couple of hours away from us, and every few months we went there for the weekend. Her mother, Barbara, was a classic Southern housewife, caring, a little obsessive, but always with a warm smile and an endless supply of homemade pies. The father, Gerald, was an old-school man who loved to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and tell stories about his youth. I have always taken these trips calmly. They weren't anything special, but they weren't annoying either. Rather, it was a time when you could take a little break from the bustle of the city, chat with your family, and get some fresh air. However, this time something was different. Ashley was acting strange. She usually enthusiastically helped her mother in the kitchen, chatted with her father about work, and in the evenings we all sat together at the large wooden table, discussing the news. But this time she was constantly absent. It seemed that she was here only with her body, but not with her thoughts. The phone did not leave her hands, and every time it rang or vibrated, she instantly jumped up and walked away, answering in a low, tense voice. "Work," she said to me once, noticing my gaze. I nodded. Of course it's work. In her field, there is always something urgent. There is always someone demanding attention. But why didn't she let these things distract her at times like this before? Why now did any message make her disappear for 10, 15 minutes? The first day went as usual. Barbara was preparing dinner, engaging me in conversation about new recipes, and Gerald offered to help me fix the old fence in the backyard. The two of us fiddled with the boards, laughing at how everything used to be built to last forever. But now even good materials couldn't save us from time. "Tell me, how are you doing, Lucas?" Gerald asked, leaning against the fence and wiping his hands of dust. "Yes, everything is fine, work as always. Sometimes even too much," I answered, flexing my shoulders. "But I think it's better than if she didn't exist." "Smart approach," he nodded. "You know, I always thought you were a good guy. You care about Ashley, and that's important." In the evening, Barbara brought us tea, and Ashley went out into the garden again, phone in hand. Her silhouette stood out clearly in the light of the lanterns, and although I could not hear her words, I saw her nervously gesturing. "Everything is fine?" Gerald asked calmly, noticing that I was distracted. "Yes, of course," I replied, looking away, but something clicked inside. I tried not to stress myself out, but thoughts appeared in my head that something strange was happening in my family. The day went on as usual, and even among the bustle, there was always time for a break. It was at that moment that I met Kevin. We had known each other for a long time, sometimes meeting at lunch, but this time I really needed a conversation. Kevin is the kind of person who doesn't ask unnecessary questions, but if something bothers him, he will definitely get the truth. We were sitting in a small cafe next to the office. Paper cups of coffee stood in front of us. Kevin lazily stirred the sugar, as if giving me time to collect my thoughts. I raised the glass to my lips, but instead of taking a sip, I simply held it in my hands. "Well, lay it out," he said, looking up at me. "You look like you were invited to your mother-in-law's family dinner and forgot to tell her that her sister and 3 cats will be there." I chuckled, but the mood remained heavy. "Nothing special. It's just, Ashley's acting weird. She is constantly busy, returns late, and now carries her phone everywhere, even in the shower. Maybe I'm making this up, but something is wrong." Kevin frowned, put down his sugar-stirring stick, and looked at me carefully. "You know, I'm not a fan of drama, but I'll say this. If a man has a feeling that something is wrong, he's rarely wrong. Details matter. Did you notice anything in particular? Changes in habits, mood?" I thought about it. Indeed, Ashley has become not just busy, she has become different. Less talking, less touching, less of us. We once could chat for hours even about small things, but now it all came down to a couple of stock phrases. She is constantly distracted. We were at her parents' house, and every 20 minutes she left with her phone. She said that I needed to answer, but I sighed. She always found time for us. And now, even if she is nearby, it is as if she is not there. Kevin narrowed his eyes and grinned. "Dude, if I took my phone with me everywhere and always under the pretext of some business, my wife would have long ago found out who I was consulting there. Maybe everything is really harmless, but be careful. Women rarely change habits without a reason." I frowned as I replayed his words in my head. I didn't want to think about it, but something inside resonated with anxiety. I don't want to be that husband who becomes paranoid about every call. "This is stupid." Kevin grinned, finished his coffee, and threw the glass into the trash can. "It's stupid to close your eyes if something bothers you. You're not going to interrogate her, are you? Just keep an eye on the details. Sometimes the truth is in the little things." We talked a little more about extraneous things, but I was no longer listening. An unpleasant feeling grew inside. I didn't know if I really wanted to know the truth. I finally had time to take care of the house. Early in the morning, I decided to tidy up the garage, where a lot of unnecessary things had accumulated. Old tools, boxes with unknown contents, several bicycle tires that I never replaced. All this needed sorting. I spent a couple of hours there, throwing out trash and finding things I had long forgotten about. Having finished with the garage, I started working on the house. I fixed a squeaking door, replaced the filter in the air conditioner, and tightened loose hinges on the kitchen cabinets. After getting all the work done, I decided I deserved a break. I made myself some coffee, sat down on the sofa, and picked up the phone, but my gaze accidentally fell on the security system control panel. At that moment, I remembered that the other day I noticed that the camera was not working properly, and something prompted me to look into the settings. I opened the panel, scanned the camera statuses, and then one strange notification caught my attention. The security system was manually disabled a few days ago. I frowned. Typically, either Ashley or I would schedule the system to turn on and off, but there were no scheduled shutdowns. However, the logs clearly showed that someone had manually disabled it for several hours. The strangest thing is that it happened at a time when Ashley and I were supposed to be at work. I checked the camera footage. The record from this period was simply missing, as if it had been erased or the system simply did not work. This just didn't happen. I ran through the possibilities in my head. Could this be an accident? Perhaps Ashley was testing something. But why then turn off the cameras for several hours? And why was she at home during working hours? I returned to the living room and thought. I picked up the mug of cooled coffee, took a sip, and felt an unpleasant feeling in my stomach. It wasn't panicky, but it definitely worried me. My gaze slid across the windows, across the yard where my car stood peacefully, along the stairs leading upstairs. Everything looked the same as always, but for some reason I felt dissonance. Should I have brought this up with Ashley? I imagined asking her a question. Did you turn off the cameras a few days ago? Sounded too direct, too suspicious. If she did it by accident, the question will only cause irritation. Unless it's a coincidence. It's better not to show that I've noticed anything just yet. I closed the control panel, took a deep breath, and decided I wouldn't say anything for now. It's better to observe first. Sometimes the truth reveals itself if you give it time. Next week, I had a business trip planned for 2 days. Usually such trips would not cause me anxiety, but now I felt that leaving without taking additional measures would be a mistake. Recent events, the shutdown of the security system, the lack of records, all this haunted me. My intuition told me that something was going on, and I needed to find out what it was. I decided to install several additional cameras that no one but me knew about. These cameras will operate independently of the overall security system, having their own power supply and recording data in separate storage. Even if someone tries to turn off the smart home again, the new cameras will continue recording everything that happens. That same evening, I stopped at a specialty store. The salesman, a short, middle-aged man, looked at me suspiciously when I asked for the most discreet battery-powered camera models. "Are you guarding the house or catching someone?" he asked with a grin. "Rather, I just want to be sure that nothing escapes my attention," I answered evasively. Having selected several small but high-quality devices, I headed home. The key is to position them so that they remain unnoticeable, but still cover key areas in the house. I didn't want Ashley or anyone else to figure out my plan. I installed the first camera in the living room. That's where Ashley was most often. I hid it behind a shelf of books, aiming the lens so that it covered most of the room. The second camera took a place in the kitchen. That's where Ashley usually talked on the phone, going to the side when she didn't want me to hear the conversation. I secured another one in the corridor leading to the exit so I could see who was entering and leaving the house and when. I placed the fourth one in the bedroom, in the corner near the closet, where the camera practically merged with the interior. After completing the installation, I checked the operation of each camera. They transmitted the signal and recorded video to a separate cloud storage. Even if someone tries to delete files from the main server, these records will remain. I sat down at the computer again, checked the settings, and looked at the test records. The system worked perfectly. I felt a slight relief, but at the same time a strange tension. What I was doing was like spy games, but I had no other choice. I just wanted to understand the situation. I didn't like the feeling that there was something going on in my own home that I didn't know about. Sitting in silence, I looked at the camera screens, feeling the anxiety growing in my chest. I knew the next step would be to just wait and watch. Business trips didn't happen often in my work, but when they did, they were a real respite. 2 days in a new place, with new clients, an opportunity to escape from the routine and look at things from a different angle. This time I had to go to Austin to install a security system in a new luxury residential complex. The journey took a little over 3 hours. I enjoyed the ride, listening to podcasts and checking my messages occasionally. The highway stretched through endless hills, interrupted from time to time by small towns with abandoned gas stations and roadside diners. Thoughts about home were spinning in my head, but I tried to distract myself by focusing on work. Upon arrival, I was greeted by the complex's manager, a tall, thin man named Tom Harris. He seemed energetic and clearly loved his job. "Lucas, right? Glad to meet you. We have heard only good things about your company. I hope the project goes smoothly," he smiled, shaking my hand. "I'll do my best," I replied, following him into the office, where drawings and plans for installing the system were waiting for me. The complex consisted of 5 buildings, each of which had to be equipped with a modern security system: cameras, motion sensors, and smart locks. First of all, I inspected the area, identifying key points for installing cameras. The main network nodes were in the basement of the main building, and I spent part of the day checking connections and testing equipment. During lunch, I decided to stop by a local cafe to take a short break. There I met Jason, an industry colleague who also installed smart systems. "Are you the same Lucas? I've heard about your projects." "You're really good at this," he said, sitting down opposite. "Glad to hear that. What are you doing?" I asked. "Mostly private orders. People want not only security, but also convenience. Smart homes are no longer the future, but the present." The conversation turned out to be interesting. Jason said he has been working on creative solutions, including a system that can identify the wearer by their gait. We exchanged contacts, and I realized that this acquaintance could be useful in the future. The rest of the day was spent checking the equipment and setting up the system. There was a power problem on one of the floors, and I had to stay late to fix it. When I finally finished, the sun was setting, turning the building facades orange. Returning to the hotel, I allowed myself to relax. Ordered dinner to the room, took a shower, and stretched out on the bed, finally feeling the tension go away. The road home always seemed pleasant to me, especially after long trips. A feeling of familiarity, comfort, calm. But this time everything was different. There were thoughts swirling in my head that I couldn't get rid of. I couldn't wait to check the camera footage, the Wi-Fi logs, to make sure that my suspicions were unfounded. But something inside told me that this wouldn't happen. My heart was beating faster than usual, and I felt more and more tense, as if I was preparing to see something that would change everything. When I opened the door, Ashley was already home. She sat in the living room, staring blankly at the phone. Usually, she would at least ask how the trip was. This time, there is silence. Cold, heavy, oppressive. I felt a lump rise in my throat. "Hi," I said, taking off my jacket and trying to speak as naturally as possible. "Hello," she answered in an even voice, without taking her eyes off the screen. I nodded, threw my bag in the corner, and walked into the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water. We didn't see each other for 2 days, but it felt like I was returning to an empty house. I glanced at her furtively, hoping to catch some hint of emotion, but her face remained expressionless. After dinner, which was more of a formality than anything meaningful, Ashley went to the bedroom, citing fatigue. I stayed in the living room, waited for a while, and then sat down at my laptop. The first thing I did was open the security control panel. I checked my Wi-Fi login history, and there it was, a new device connected to my house one evening when I was away. This could not be explained by chance. Next, I moved on to the cameras. Open the notes. Several times over the past 2 days, the system detected movement in the house when Ashley was not alone. Owen's face appeared on the screen. He entered through the back door. My heart sank. I continued to watch the video, feeling how my insides grew colder with each frame. Owen acted confidently. It was clearly not his first time here. He knew where everything was, calmly walked through the house, entered the kitchen, as if he felt like the owner. But the worst was yet to come. I scrolled further until I saw what I was most afraid of seeing. The bedroom camera captured a moment that left no room for doubt. Ashley and Owen. They had sex. Their voices, movements, intimate gestures, all this was in front of me, in cold frames of silent betrayal. Do you know what's the funniest thing? Ashley laughed hoarsely, running her nails along his chest. He doesn't even try. She thinks that I'm just tired, that I'm going through a hard period. Owen chuckled, lazily squeezing her thigh. Poor thing. Everything is waiting for his wife to want him again. Ashley rolled her eyes, licking her lips. And me, I don't even pretend anymore. I just say, no, turn around and go to sleep. Owen laughed loudly. So, his whole married life now is quiet despair in the dark. Ashley arched, pressing herself closer to him. I don't even strain myself with him, I just turn away and fall asleep. And with you, I finally feel what real intimacy is. Owen grinned, squeezing her chin. Because now you have someone who fills you deeper than that pathetic loser could ever dream of. He doesn't even understand who is now the boss in his house. Acoustic sensors picked up every word, every moan, every whisper that should not have sounded in my house. I leaned back in my chair, feeling my heart pounding in my ears. An icy lump thickened in my chest. This was not just speculation, not just guesswork, it was reality. Now I had more than just suspicions. I had proof. I ran my hands over my face, trying to comprehend what I saw. Everything that seemed stable collapsed overnight. Now the question was not whether it was true or not. The question was what to do next. I sat in the dark, staring at my laptop screen as the video finished playing. Pause, black, silence. I could close the lid, delete the files, pretend it never happened. But reality was already imprinted in my head, and there was no turning back. Something dark was bubbling in my chest, something I had never experienced. Pain, anger, humiliation, probably a little bit of everything. I felt my heart beating wildly and my temples pulsating from the rush of adrenaline. The first thought was the simplest: pack your things and leave. Slam the door behind you, leave everything behind, erase Ashley from your life, erase her like a useless file. But the more I thought about it, the more something else flared up inside me, evil, cold, calculating. I could just get a divorce, file documents, end this marriage, which has already turned into a fiction. But this was not enough. They laughed in my house. They betrayed me, knowing that I would return, knowing that they were taking a risk. This was not an accidental mistake. It was a conscious, cynical betrayal. And just walk away, just give them what they might have been waiting for. No, I didn't mean to play the victim. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath. Think, Lucas. Calmly, coolly. The force was on my side. I had knowledge, technology, the ability to control the situation, to see everything. I could expose them to ridicule, expose them in front of colleagues, friends, her family. Or I could act more quietly, more subtly, let them feel the same thing that I felt now. I got up and walked around the room, trying to put my thoughts into a logical chain. The first thing I needed was time. Time to decide exactly how I want to end this. There is no hurry. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was planning on preparing a whole banquet. I sat down in a chair, opened a bottle of whiskey, and slowly poured myself a glass. The liquid burned my throat, but I continued to drink, feeling the warmth spreading through my body. Various options popped into my head. I could send these notes to her parents. I could leak them to the office where they worked. I could just put it all on the internet, tear their lives to pieces. But that would be too easy, too fast. I remembered how Ashley and I met, how she smiled at me that evening in the bar, how she played with words, how she seemed like the most sincere woman in the world. Was it a lie from the start, or did something change later? I threw my head back and closed my eyes. Memories mixed with reality, leaving behind only bitterness. Then I thought about Owen. This man entered my house, used my things, slept with my wife, laughed, knowing that I did not suspect anything. He's not just a traitor. He is the enemy, and they don't forgive enemies. I looked at my watch. It was already past midnight. I should have gone to bed, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep a wink. Tomorrow I will wake up, have breakfast with Ashley at the same table, kiss her forehead, as if everything's the same. Let her think that I am still her trusting, unsuspecting husband. Let him enjoy this moment. For now. I woke up early, but lay in bed, pretending that I was still sleeping. Ashley was breathing nearby. Her breathing was even and calm. It was as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't destroyed everything we'd built over the years. I clenched my fists, but quickly pulled myself together. Now is not the time for emotions. Now is the time to observe. In the kitchen, while the coffee was brewing, I silently watched Ashley get ready for work. She looked perfect. Hairstyle, makeup, impeccably chosen suit. In years past, I would have thought I was lucky to have a wife like her. Now I knew who she was trying so hard for. Is it late again today? I asked, taking a sip of coffee. Ashley froze for a moment, but then put on her usual smile. Yes, a lot of meetings, then dinner with clients. I see, I nodded. Have a nice day. When the door closed behind her, I sat down at my laptop. I needed more information. I opened the Wi-Fi logs again and made sure that Owen was connecting to the network, not only in the evenings, but also during the day, during the workday. They met here at my house while I was at work. The correspondence that I managed to restore confirmed everything. They discussed how good they were together, shared moments of passion, and made fun of me. "He's so naive, he doesn't even know," Ashley wrote. "Honestly, sometimes I even feel sorry for him." "Well, almost," Owen answered with a smiley face. These words burned inside me more than any blow. But there were other messages, business ones. Owen told her about his new project, discussed strategy with her, shared inside information that perhaps should not have been shared even with his colleagues. This could be to my advantage. I began to scrupulously record everything that could be useful to me. In the afternoon, I stopped at the cafe where I usually met with Kevin. I needed advice. "Do you still want to be just an observer?" he asked, putting the cup aside. "For now, yes," I answered, although I wasn't entirely sure myself. "Then be careful. The longer you hold it inside, the stronger the explosion will be." I nodded. He was right. But I still had time. I needed to know everything, every detail of their affair, every step they took. I sat in the car, looking out the windshield, but not seeing the road in front of me. Thoughts were spinning in my head that had never even occurred to me before. Divorce, division of property, money. As much as I wanted to, I had to protect myself. If I leave things as they are, Ashley could easily take half of everything I've earned from me, or maybe more. I wasn't paranoid, but after what I saw, I couldn't trust her. She betrayed me, which means she could, without a twinge of conscience, try to leave me with nothing. I had worked too hard, put too much into this marriage to just walk away and leave her with everything I had built, so it was time to take action. I opened the banking app on my phone. There was a lot left in my personal account, but the joint finances were also significant. Too significant to risk. I didn't know how soon this would all end, but I knew one thing. When she realized that I knew everything, she shouldn't have a chance to rip me off. First of all, I transferred money from the main account to a new one, opened in advance in my name. No notifications, no traces. Then I blocked her access to our shared cards. She might not even notice it right away, but when she does, it will be too late. The next step was a lawyer. I wasn't planning on applying right now, but a consultation wouldn't hurt. I dialed the number Kevin gave me. "Jackson and Partners, I'm listening to you," said an even voice. "Hello. I need advice on divorce proceedings and financial protection. When can we meet? We have a window tomorrow morning. Will it suit you?" "Yes, sign me up." I pressed end call and exhaled deeply. I never thought I would find myself in such a situation. The next day, at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning, I entered the office of the law firm Jackson and Associates. The spacious hall, leather chairs, glass walls, everything here exuded confidence and high cost. A young secretary met me at the reception. "Lucas Brady, come in. Mr. Jackson is already waiting for you." I nodded and headed into the office, where a man of about 50 with gray temples and a tenacious gaze was waiting for me. He motioned for me to sit down. "So what brings you to me?" he asked, opening his notebook. I briefly talked about my situation without going into emotions. Just the facts: infidelity, possible divorce, the need to protect your assets. "Have you already taken any steps?" he clarified. "Yes, I transferred most of the money to a new account and limited access to cards. Nothing official yet." Jackson nodded approvingly. "That's reasonable. But there are nuances. If your wife decides to challenge this in court, you will need to prove that the money belongs exclusively to you. She can claim that they were part of the family budget. What if some of them are invested in my business? That's a different conversation. You need to collect all the documentation to show that you invested your personal funds and not joint finances." I nodded. The conversation became more detailed. We discussed possible scenarios, how to protect real estate, shares, accounts. I learned how to properly prepare paperwork to prevent Ashley from having a chance at most of my property. I shook his hand and left the office with a new understanding of the situation. Now it was not only a moral war, but also a financial strategy, and I was going to win. After meeting with the lawyer, I finally understood there is no need to rush. In this game, emotions are my enemy and composure is the only weapon that can give me an edge. Any outburst of anger, any thoughtless word, even a slight trembling of the voice can work against me. The less I show, the harder it will be to guess my intentions. I left the office in a leisurely manner, with a deliberate deliberateness that should inspire confidence. A light rain was drizzling outside, dripping down the collar of his coat in icy drops. I put my hands in my pockets and breathed in the cool, damp air, feeling a sense of control slowly grow within me. Now I have a plan. Now I have a goal. My task is to behave as if nothing happened. Not a single unnecessary gesture, not a single word spoken out of place. I have to smile, shake hands, joke, pretend that everything is the same, that everything is going the way it should go. This will be my shield, my armor. Let them think that I am calm, that I have no reason to worry. Let them guess what's on my mind. I walked slowly, organizing every detail of the upcoming game in my head. I entered the house and found Ashley in the kitchen. She was writing something on her phone, barely raising her eyes when I walked past. "How is the day?" I asked, opening the refrigerator and taking out a bottle of water. "Fine." "I'm tired," she answered, without looking up from the screen. Previously, her behavior like this would have irritated me. Now I just smiled to myself. Let him think that I am still that naive husband who does not notice the obvious. I leaned my elbows on the counter and looked at her carefully. I once considered Ashley my best friend. We could talk for hours, laugh at stupid jokes, share plans. Now a completely different woman sat in front of me, distant, cold, almost a stranger. I sat down at the table, slowly drinking water, watching as she absent-mindedly tugged at her hair. "Maybe we can go somewhere on the weekend," I suggested. She froze for a second, then hastily shook her head. "It won't work. I have things planned." "Workers." "Of course, workers." I didn't ask which ones exactly. He simply nodded, indicating that he accepted the answer. For the next few days, I continued to behave as usual. We shared one bed, had breakfast at the same table, and discussed minor household details. But inside, I felt the distance growing. She thought that everything was going according to her script, but in fact, I already knew how to put an end to this story. One evening, as I stood at the window, a memory popped into my head. Our first trip. We just got married and went to San Francisco, filled with joy and plans for the future. Then we were sure that many years of happiness awaited us ahead, that we would conquer this world together. I remember Ashley spinning on the pier with her arms outstretched, as if she wanted to hug the whole world. Her ringing laughter, light and infectious, flew over the water, and even passers-by, catching this sound, involuntarily smiled back at her. She was dazzling in the rays of the setting sun, her hair shimmered with golden highlights, and her eyes shone as if the entire sky was reflected in them. The wind played with the hem of her light dress, causing it to flutter like wings. She seemed weightless, almost airy, a creature from another world, created for happiness, light, freedom. I looked at her with bated breath, trying to capture this moment in my memory as if I knew it was priceless. And the next moment she grabbed my hand and pulled me towards her. Her fingers were warm, alive, strong. She leaned closer, her lips barely touched my ear, and whispering, she said that she wanted to remember this evening forever. Her voice was filled with such sincere delight, such pure joy that I could not help but believe it. I really thought then that all this was forever. I was drunk, not from the wine that we drank in an expensive restaurant, but from her energy, from the unbridled desire to live, from her laughter, from the way she looked at me, as if there was no one more important in the whole world. We ordered the most expensive oysters, although we both hated them. We did it not because of taste, but simply because it seemed right to enjoy every moment, to play at luxury, to pretend that the world belonged only to us. We laughed at this, grimaced at the strange aftertaste, but ate, teasing each other and pretending that we understood this delicacy. And at night there were no boundaries or words between us. Only touches, only quiet, lazy laughter in the dark, only the feeling that time has stopped, frozen, allowing us to belong to each other without looking back. Her skin smelled of salt, wine, and something elusively warm, homely, real. I inhaled this smell, caught every breath, felt her heat, her trembling, her hands sliding along my back, her lips leaving invisible marks on the skin. There was everything in her gaze: warmth, confidence, a promise that this would never end. We dissolved into this night, burning in a desire that did not require words or explanations. Only later, when fatigue covered us like a soft blanket, did we freeze in silence, only occasionally broken by her quiet breathing. The sheets carried the aroma of her perfume, subtle, barely perceptible, but so familiar. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, just listening to her breathing next to me, how her fingers, even in sleep, lazily slid over my chest, as if refusing to let go. Then it seemed to me that we were truly one, that this feeling was indestructible, that we were forever connected by something that could not be broken. Now in front of me was a completely different woman. Cold, alien. Or maybe I just didn't see the truth before. Over the past few weeks, I have been watching Ashley and Owen's every move, studying their correspondence, monitoring calls and Wi-Fi logs. But what I discovered recently could be the key to something more. Owen was not just a senior manager, he was involved in an important transaction, the details of which clearly should not have fallen into the wrong hands. I found out about this by accident. In one of their correspondence, Ashley forwarded him a presentation marked confidential. Owen thanked her and wrote something like, "If everything goes smoothly, I'll be fine." Then I didn't attach any importance to it, but decided to check what was going on. Using the same methods I used to observe their affair, I began gathering information about the project. It turned out that Owen was involved in a deal with a large contractor related to municipal contracts. Apparently, millions of dollars were at stake, and if someone could prove that Owen was passing on confidential data to third parties, the consequences for him would be catastrophic. I reviewed the camera footage and found another interesting point. Several times during their meetings, Owen not only indulged in pleasures with my wife, but also discussed the details of the deal, sometimes directly over the phone. He was so used to feeling safe that he didn't even bother to check if his voice was being recorded, and I wrote it down. Now I had not just guesses, but concrete evidence. I collected all the data: correspondence, calls, camera recordings, logs of network logins. This whole puzzle began to take shape into a clear picture. I didn't know what exactly I was going to do with it, but one thing was clear: I had in my hands a tool that could destroy his career. Now it remains to decide exactly how to play this card. But there was no hurry. I waited. At the same time, I met with a lawyer to finalize the divorce issue. The documents were ready. The process was structured in such a way that I would not have to participate in it. Ashley will find out about everything only when a ready-made package of papers appears in front of her. She was counting on joint finances, but after signing all the papers, she would only have to rely on her own strength. I made sure she didn't get any of what I had earned over the years. No lawyer battles, no protracted proceedings, everything will be clear, quick, and irreversible. Now she will be left with what she truly deserves. I knew Owen had put everything on this deal. He hoped to advance his career, perhaps even get a seat on the board of directors. But now I had the key to ruining his plans. I was going to anonymously share data with competitors. The problem was who exactly to give them to. There were several companies interested in this contract, and I had to choose the one that would use the information with maximum benefit for itself and with maximum damage for Owen. I started by looking for contact persons. Thanks to my business, I had connections in technical circles, and after a couple of calls, I was able to connect with a representative of one of the largest competitors of Owen's company. His name was Victor Holmes, an experienced corporate lawyer who knew how to use information to his advantage. Through a friend of mine, I arranged a meeting. The meeting took place in a neutral place, a small private club, where entry was by invitation only. Dim lamplight, muted jazz, and expensive drinks created an atmosphere of exclusivity. Victor turned out to be a man of about 45, with a cold, penetrating gaze and the manners of a man accustomed to always winning. He was impeccably dressed, His movements were precise and confident. This man did not waste time on empty talk. "I was told that you have information that may interest us," he began, taking a sip of whiskey and looking at me appreciatively. I chuckled slightly and handed him the flash drive. "It's not even information," I said. "This is a way to put an end to a game where your competitor thinks he has already won." Victor didn't immediately look at the contents. He simply put the flash drive in his jacket pocket and then looked at me again, clearly wondering whether to continue the conversation. "And what do you want in return?" he asked calmly, but there was a hint of wariness in his voice. "Nothing. Just make it work. It is beneficial for you to win the tender. It is beneficial for me for him to lose." Holmes nodded silently, took the phone from his pocket, and sent a short message. "I will study your evidence," he said, putting away the phone. "If everything turns out to be as you say, my client will find a way to use it correctly. And I think that your acquaintance is unlikely to be able to keep his place after this." I noticed how he smiled faintly and realized that the job was done. Owen had no idea what kind of blow he was about to receive. "I hope for your efficiency," I said, getting up from the table. Victor offered to drink, but I refused. I didn't celebrate it's too early. Leaving the club, I got into the car and exhaled. Now all that was left was to wait for the dominoes to start falling. I didn't know exactly what it felt like, the moment when you leave behind everything you knew. When you close the door behind you, without looking back, without doubt, without allowing yourself even the slightest hesitation. But now, standing in the middle of an empty house, I finally felt it. Strange calm. No anger, no pain, no regret, just silence. I packed my things quickly and methodically. A suitcase with essentials, a backpack with equipment, documents. No photos together, no gifts, nothing that could leave a taste of the past. Everything that had any sentimental value remained here. The engagement ring lay on the bedside table, like the finishing touch to this story. I ran my finger along its smooth surface, paused for a second, and left it there. I don't need it anymore. Before leaving, I looked around the house again. I ran my hand along the wall, remembering how we chose this paint color. I remembered how we argued about where to put the sofa, how we laughed when we first tried to cook dinner in this kitchen. This place was once filled with joy, but now it was just empty space. No longer a home, just a brick and glass building. I left the keys on the kitchen table, walked out the door, and got into the car. He started the engine, but was in no hurry to leave. This house was reflected in the rearview mirror. Just yesterday I was returning to it, thinking that this was my refuge, my fortress. Now it's just a point on the map. I took a deep breath, gripped the steering wheel, and finally drove out of the yard. Ashley hurriedly got out of the car, glancing at the house. She couldn't stay late. Her meeting with Owen had gone on too long, and she was already late. She took a deep breath, checking her reflection in the car's side mirror. Everything is fine. Nobody will suspect anything. She straightened her hair again, exhaled, and headed towards the entrance. But before she could reach the porch, a man in a formal suit stopped next to her. "Bailiff." She immediately felt something was wrong. "Mrs. Brady?" he asked in an official tone. "Yes." Ashley froze, frowning slightly. "I have documents for you." He handed her a thin folder. Ashley automatically took it, opened it, and ran her eyes over the first lines. "A claim for divorce." She froze. For a second, it seemed as if the letters on the page had merged into one blur. Her breathing hitched. She raised her head sharply and looked around, as if trying to find Lucas nearby, but he was nowhere to be found. Only his signature at the bottom of the page made it clear that this was not a mistake. "What?" she muttered, unable to believe it. The bailiff shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "All details are set out in the documents. You can review them and contact your lawyer if necessary." He nodded, turned around, and walked away, leaving her alone on the porch. The house greeted her with emptiness. Silence, too harsh, too alien. Lucas's things were gone. She quickly walked to the bedroom, as if hoping that she would find at least something there. But there was only a ring thrown on the nightstand. Ashley swallowed. My heart beat dully in my chest. This is impossible. The office lived its usual life: calls, negotiations, coffee breaks, the sound of keyboards, the occasional chuckle from employees. But for Ashley, this day seemed like a living nightmare. She walked into the meeting room, clutching the documents tightly in her hands, as if they could explain to her how it had come to this. Her heart was beating too fast. The same question was ringing in her head. How did he know? She paced nervously around the room, glancing quickly at the door. She needed to talk to Owen. Immediately. He should help you figure it out. He always said that he was in control of the situation. Where is he? The door opened and Owen walked in, smiling casually. But as soon as he saw her face, the smile disappeared. What's happened? His voice became tense. He closed the door and leaned his back against it, waiting for an answer. Ashley threw the folder on the table. Lucas knows everything. Her voice was quiet, but saturated with anxiety. He left. He just took it and disappeared. And he filed for divorce. Owen frowned, picked up the documents, quickly flipped through the pages, and then looked back at her. Did he not tell you anything? Not a hint? No scandal? Just left? Nothing, Ashley exhaled sharply, shaking her head in shock. I returned home. His things were gone. Only the ring, bailiff with papers. Everything was already prepared, as if he knew everything in advance. Owen sat down opposite him, folding his arms across his chest. Ashley clenched her fingers into a fist, feeling her palms sweat. She took a deep breath before speaking out loud the thought that popped into her head. He works on security systems. What if he was watching us? Owen froze, then nodded slowly, processing what he had just said. Damn, if so, then he knows a lot more than just about us. If he played the silent observer, who knows what he has on his hands? His voice now sounded tense. Ashley closed her eyes and ran her hands over her face. At that moment, the door opened sharply, and two men in formal suits entered the meeting room. Following them appeared their boss, Mr. Harding, the general director of the company. What's going on here? His voice sounded cold and distant. Owen stood up, trying to remain calm. Sir, what's the matter? One of Mr. Harding's companions, a company lawyer, threw a folder of documents onto the table. The contract has been broken. Our competitors have filed a complaint. They have evidence of leakage of confidential information. Let's figure out where the leak came from. Owen turned pale. Ashley froze, feeling icy fear creeping up her spine. It's some kind of mistake, Owen tried to justify himself, but Harding just shook his head wearily. No, Owen, this is the end. You are temporarily suspended from work during the investigation. If it is confirmed that you transferred data to third parties, you yourself understand the consequences. Ashley grabbed the edge of the table, trying to comprehend what had just happened. One name flashed through her head: Lucas. Ashley sat in her car in the parking lot in front of her office, mechanically tapping her fingernail on her phone screen. My head was buzzing. My thoughts were confused. A few days ago, she had her usual life: a successful job, confidence in the future, a lover who promised her everything she wanted. Now everything had collapsed, and she didn't know how to stop it. She rubbed her temples, trying to ease the headache a little, and looked at the phone again. There were no messages from Owen. After the investigation in the office, he abruptly moved away, stopped answering calls, and ignored her messages. The last time she tried to talk to him in person, he was cold and irritated. I have no time for this now, Ashley. His voice was sharp, abrupt. I have problems, serious problems. Are you having problems? She almost screamed. I was left without money, without Lucas, and now under the threat of being fired. It's your problem, he snapped. I can't deal with your hysterics right now. Figure it out yourself. The connection has been lost. Ashley looked at the screen, not believing what she had just heard. Just a couple of weeks ago, he had been caring, confident, the one who assured her that everything would be fine, that they would be together. Now he left her without regret, without even trying to support her. The atmosphere in the office was icy. Colleagues did not ask questions, but their views spoke for themselves. She felt people whispering behind her, some abruptly ending the conversation as she passed by. At lunchtime, she was called to the HR department. "We are forced to conduct an internal audit due to the loss of the contract," the HR manager said dryly, handing her the notice. "Until the end of the trial, your position remains in question. If I were you, I would start looking for new opportunities." Ashley listened, but didn't seem to hear. She left the office in complete daze. Her career, for which she had worked so hard, was coming apart at the seams. But the worst thing was returning home. The house that had once seemed cozy was now a prison, with a mortgage that she could no longer share with Lucas, with bills that he was no longer going to pay. She tried to use a credit card, it was refused. The general account is closed. Nobody said a word to her. Just at one moment, everything disappeared. She sat in the empty living room, staring at the phone. I wanted to call someone, ask for advice, support. But to whom? The friends who had so easily accepted her new romance were now in no hurry to answer. Some turned away completely, not wanting to interfere. Owen is missing. Lucas. Lucas didn't just leave. He erased her from his life and left her alone in this chaos. She got up, went to the mirror in the hallway, and looked at her reflection. There is fear and confusion in the eyes. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know what to do next. Owen sat in his office, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Until recently, he was sure that he was in control of the situation, but now the world was collapsing before his eyes. Yesterday, he was finally suspended from work, and today he received notice of immediate dismissal. This was the official end of his career. "Let's be honest," said Mr. Harding, the general director, coldly. "After the scandal with the contract, we have no choice. The company cannot afford reputational risks." "I never passed on information," Owen muttered, feeling the back of his neck break out in a cold sweat. "We don't need your excuses," the lawyer sitting next to Harding snapped. "The evidence suggests otherwise. And if you want to avoid getting sued, you'd better just walk away." Owen wanted to object, wanting to say that he had been set up, that this was all a mistake, but he realized that no one was listening to him. A lump came to my throat. Everything he worked for was gone. Career, respect from colleagues, prospects, everything is destroyed in one moment. As he left the building, he felt the eyes of the employees watching him. Just a month ago, he felt like a king here. Now he was nobody. On the street, he tried to dial Ashley, but her phone did not answer. Nobody answered. He got into the car and stared at the windshield. What now? What's next? Ashley sat in the courtroom, staring blankly at the papers in front of her. Divorce. Now it was official. Lucas was not here, he did not attend the meeting, he did not even send a lawyer. Everything passed quickly, almost without emotion, as if it was just another document and not a ruined life. The judge clearly announced the final decision. The marriage contract they once signed left her with nothing. No payments, no compensation. Only mortgages, bills, and debts that I now had to deal with myself. She couldn't believe it ended like this. She hoped that she could somehow get out, but Lucas had foreseen everything. He left, leaving her with the consequences of her own decisions. She glanced at the lawyer, but he only shrugged slightly. Nothing could be changed. Owen was supposed to be her rock, but his problems only grew. A week after his dismissal, he was arrested on charges of financial fraud. As it turned out, the contract he was trying to pull off was just the tip of the iceberg. Other dark cases came to light. Now he sat in a cell, awaiting trial. Ashley tried to contact his lawyer, but received only a dry response that the case was bad, and Owen faced several years in prison. She tried to call acquaintances, friends, and colleagues. Someone didn't answer. Some dryly said that they did not want to be involved in this. Doors that had previously been open to her were now closing one after another. When she returned home, she was overcome by a feeling of emptiness, an oppressive, heavy, icy wave spreading throughout her body. Once this house was her refuge, filled with warmth and joy. There was the sound of laughter, the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the mornings, and flickering candles on quiet evenings. Her dreams, her hopes, her love lived in this space. Now the walls seemed alien, and the silence was suffocating. The house was no longer a home. It became a reminder of everything she had lost. The creaking of the mailbox door broke the viscous silence. Ashley glanced inside, as if she knew in advance what awaited her, and sighed wearily. Receipts, bills, notices from the bank, each envelope was a sentence, a dispassionate reminder of the debts that, like a snowball, continued to grow. She pulled out a particularly unpleasant letter from the pile of papers, another warning about paying her mortgage. The deadline is almost over. Her income was now barely enough for food and utility bills, and if she was fired. Thoughts swirled in my head like a whirlwind of anxiety. She didn't remember how she got to the living room, but now she was sitting on a shabby sofa, covering her face with her hands. A dull pain twisted my chest, my breathing became labored. Everything was falling apart, and there was no way out. Her marriage turned out to be a dummy, an illusion that melted away, leaving behind only the bitterness of disappointment. The lover, the one for whom she went against everything she had, is now in prison. No money. The friends disappeared, one after another, as soon as she ceased to be beneficial or interesting to them. She was left alone. Through the tears clouding her vision, she looked out the window, but saw nothing, neither people passing by, nor moving cars, nor the light of advertising lights. Only vague shadows, as if her life was now a blur. Everything that used to seem like a beautiful story to her, a book in which every chapter is full of meaning, passion, hope, has turned into an endless series of shattered dreams. And the worst thing was the realization. She brought herself to this end. Neither circumstances nor someone else's, will only her own decisions, mistakes, desires, for which she now had to pay too high a price. Lucas sat at a table in a dimly lit bar, lazily stirring ice in a glass of whiskey. Opposite him, Nick, stretched out in a chair, watched him with a grin, clearly waiting for him to speak. They had been to this bar more than once, but today the atmosphere was special light, almost festive. "Come on, lay it out already," Nick chuckled, taking a sip of beer. "I can't wait to hear how you ruined their lives so meticulously." Lucas chuckled as he slowly tilted the glass, watching the ice collide with the sides. "I won't lie, Nick. I'm happy. Very pleased. Everything went even better than I expected. No screams, no tears, no hysterics. Just cold, clear calculation. It was as if I had pulled off a perfectly planned operation. And you didn't even doubt it?" Nick raised an eyebrow, putting the glass on the table. "Not for a second. They thought I was a naive idiot. They thought they could get away with everything. But I just showed that everything has consequences. Ashley was left with debts. Owen was in prison. They got exactly what they deserved, and without a single direct action of mine. They have driven themselves into a trap." Nick snorted, shaking his head. "I knew you were holding something back, but damn it, Lucas, it was a brilliant move. You literally took their lives apart without touching a single one of them. It's not even revenge, it's a chess game where you played checkmate in 3 moves, and they didn't even realize what they were playing." Lucas grinned and shook his head. "The funny thing is, Nick, I didn't do anything to them directly. I simply allowed them to reap the fruits of their own decisions. All I did was remove myself from their equation, and then they are on their own. Well, considering that you closed all the accounts, cut off her path to money, and anonymously sent information about Owen to her competitors." Nick bowed his head as if assessing the situation. "Well, yes, you can say that you just removed yourself." Lucas laughed and raised his glass in a slight gesture of toast. "Exactly. Not a single blow, not a single scene. Just a well-thought-out plan. Ironic, right? They thought that I was weak-willed, that I could be manipulated. Well, let them now enjoy the consequences." Nick knocked his glass against his. "Well, here's to a clear victory." They drank, and Lucas finally allowed himself to relax. Lucas stood on the balcony of the hotel room, leaning his elbows on the cold metal railing. A night city stretched out before him, endless and alive, like a giant organism flickering with thousands of lights. Myriads of headlights stretched along the streets in luminous veins, Neon signs flashed on and off in time with the rhythm of the night, and somewhere below cars hummed, merging into a constant, subtle noise reminiscent of the breathing of a metropolis. In one hand, he held a glass of whiskey. The reflections of distant lanterns were reflected in the amber liquid, dancing on the glass with fiery flashes. Taking a slow sip, Lucas felt the warmth of the drink spreading throughout his body, but it could not melt the cold inside. He knew it was time to move on. The past is left behind its mistakes, regrets, broken dreams. Everything that once held him in place now crumbled into dust, turning into memories that no longer had power over him. But why then did this city still remind him of what he had lost? Lucas ran his fingers along the rim of his glass, peering intensely into the lights. In this chaotic splendor, there was a hidden order, a hidden logic of moving forward, which he had always known about, but only now was ready to accept. He took a deep breath of cool air. The wind played with the collar of his shirt, like an invisible hand, reminding him that it was time to let go of everything unnecessary. The time had come for new solutions, new horizons. Lucas took one last sip, placed the empty glass on the railing, and turned away from the night city. Tomorrow another life will begin. The morning greeted Lucas with soft light breaking through the thick curtains of the hotel room. He woke up early, but did not feel the usual tiredness. On the contrary, there was lightness in his body, as if he had dropped a heavy load that he had been carrying with him for too long. He poured himself some strong black coffee, the bitterness of which finally drove away the remnants of sleep, and sat down at his laptop. The display illuminated his face with a cold bluish light, reflecting in his eyes, full of concentration. In front of him was a list of old contacts, names, numbers, people with whom he had once been connected by business, friendship, and maybe something more. Connections mattered a lot in his field, and he knew that among them there would be those who would help him start over. Lucas glanced over the names, choosing those he could truly trust. Not just acquaintances, but trusted people who know how to keep their word. A few seconds of thought, and my fingers confidently drummed on the keys. The first messages went away, then the calls followed. "Lucas, buddy, how many years?" exclaimed one of his old clients, the owner of a large construction company. "There is something interesting just for you. New neighborhoods, first-class homes. Come and see for yourself." Lucas chuckled. He didn't even need to explain what he wanted. Experienced people understood everything without further ado. A few minutes later, another contact called a luxury real estate agent, a man who knew this city like the back of his hand. "Lucas, you're not just looking for a house, right? You are looking for a place that will be yours. I know one thing, you will like it." The familiar confidence in his interlocutor's voice made Lucas understand that he was on the right path. By evening, he had several options. A couple of days later, Lucas was driving around the city, looking at potential houses. He was in no hurry to make a choice. He wanted not just to find a place to live, but to feel that it was really his. Each house he entered was beautiful in its own way. Spacious living rooms, modern kitchens, stylish decoration. But most of them were missing something. They were too faceless, too sterile, like pictures from a catalog. Lucas was looking for something different. A home that didn't just look expensive, but had character. A place where you could live and not just spend the night. Without huge panoramic windows through which everyone can look inside. Without pretentious design, which requires constant maintenance of perfect order. He needed something solid, reliable, real. And so, when he was already beginning to lose patience, the agent brought him to a house that immediately caught his eye. Nothing extra. A two-story brick building with a massive door, solid walls, and slightly rough finishes. Inside there is a combination of natural wood, stone, and metal. High ceilings, cozy but simple interior. A spacious living room with a massive leather sofa, a good quality kitchen where you can cook a steak and pour yourself whiskey without fear of spoiling something. In the office, there is a wooden table that has seen more than one serious decision. Lucas ran his hand along the railing of the stairs and listened to his feelings. It was calm here. Here we could start again. "Shall we take it?" The agent smiled, noticing how Lucas lingered in the hallway. He nodded. "Let's take it." That evening, he met Nick at a bar to share the news. Seriously, are you not just moving, but immediately taking your dream home? Nick grinned, twirling a bottle of beer in his hands. Why not? I'm not going to sit in the old city and watch the past pull me back, Lucas replied, lazily swaying his whiskey in his glass. I have money, I have work that I can do from anywhere. I want to start again, completely. Well, you can't argue. You now have freedom in its purest form. Nick respectfully raised the bottle. For a new chapter of your life. For her, Lucas agreed and took a sip. A week later, Lucas stood on the threshold of his new home. He was in no hurry to go inside. He just paused for a moment, breathing in the cool air and realizing that from now on everything would be different. Inside, he was greeted by a simple but solid space, a spacious living room with a massive leather sofa, a simple but cozy office, a kitchen without unnecessary frills, a solid one, with comfortable wooden cabinets and a stone countertop. High ceilings gave a feeling of freedom, and large but not ostentatious windows filled the rooms with natural light without turning the house into a fishbowl. Lucas slowly ran his hand over the smooth surface of the table, feeling the coolness of the wood. There was still a slight smell of fresh renovation in the air, but I already wanted to fill this place with something of my own, the aroma of coffee in the morning, the muted light of a table lamp in the evenings, the sounds of life. Lucas sat in his office, immersed in routine work. In the silence, only the muffled ticking of the wall clock and the light tapping of his fingers on the keyboard could be heard. He scanned the new requests for security installations, going through the requests one by one. Work did not stand still. The world was changing, technology was improving, and wealthy people were still looking for ways to protect themselves, their families, and property. Lucas has long known that when a client has money, he doesn't just want an alarm system and a couple of cameras on the facade. He wants confidence, security that will allow him to sleep peacefully, knowing that his home is a real fortress. Ordinary applications rarely aroused Lucas's interest. Most clients chose standard solutions, video surveillance, motion sensors, smart locks. But one order stood out from the rest. Large mansion in an elite area, full coverage of the territory, high-end equipment, integration with private security, advanced access control systems. The request was serious, and judging by the details, the customer wanted not just protection, but a comprehensive solution that would turn his house into a real fortress. The application came from a certain General William Harrington. Lucas squinted thoughtfully, skimming the information. The name seemed familiar, although he couldn't immediately remember where he'd heard it. General, the man is clearly not one of those who is simply afraid of robbers or random thieves. Such a person is accustomed to discipline, to thoughtful decisions, and probably understands security. Interesting, Lucas thought, leaning back in his chair. He contacted the number provided, and the voice on the other end grumbled. Arrive tomorrow at 10 a.m. Do you know the address? Now I know, Lucas answered, writing down the coordinates. The next morning, Lucas drove up to the massive wrought iron gate and stopped. The gate towered before him, powerful, heavy, but moving with absolute precision. He entered the code that was sent to him in advance, and a second later the mechanism quietly came to life. The metal doors parted to the sides silently, as if they were lubricated every day. Having passed through the entrance, he found himself in a world of impeccable order and luxury. A snow-white mansion with columns loomed before him, looking as if it had stepped off the cover of an elite architectural magazine. Every detail of the facade spoke of high cost and refined taste, from the perfectly trimmed bushes at the foot to the heavy carved doors with massive bronze handles. On either side of the driveway was a well-kept garden with perfectly smooth lawns, statues, and neatly trimmed trees. The air was saturated with a light aroma of freshly cut grass and flowers. At the very entrance to the mansion stood several expensive cars sparkling, without a single speck of dust. These were cars of people who were accustomed to a higher standard of living. Lucas turned off the engine, got out of the car, and looked around for a moment. Everything in this place spoke of the exclusive status of the owner. Every stone in the cobbled path, every curve of the wrought iron lanterns at the gate, everything was done flawlessly, without compromise. There was no place for chance here. Before he could take even a couple of steps, the massive door of the mansion swung open. A young woman flew out of the house. Her steps were fast, confident, as if she was going into battle. She was tall and slender, moving with that easy grace that is characteristic of people who are confident in themselves. Her long brown hair fell over her shoulders in soft waves, fluttering slightly with every step, catching the morning breeze and glistening in the sunlight. The skin is smooth, with a slight golden tint, emphasizing natural beauty, and the face. The face seemed to be created to bewitch. High cheekbones, a slightly upturned nose, full lips, which were now tightly compressed, betraying her irritation. But most of all, the eyes were catchy deep, bright green, with a fire that flared up in them, like a flame flaring up in the wind. She was angry, and this made her even more attractive. The tight dark blue blouse emphasized the curves of her figure, the thin fabric hinting at softness, but did nothing to soften her confident posture. The tight trousers sat perfectly on her hips, emphasizing every smooth curve of her body, and the thin heels gave her even more expressiveness. She walked quickly, as if she was going to either tell Lucas off or throw something heavy at him. Or maybe both options at once. She stopped a few steps away from him, crossed her arms over her chest, and this gesture only further emphasized the curve of her waist. Her gaze glared at him. "Listen," she blurted out, not even allowing him to open his mouth. The voice sounded sharp, indignant, and real indignation blazed in the green eyes. "If my father thinks that I will allow him to install security cameras in every room, then he is sadly mistaken. This is an invasion of privacy." She stood in front of him, hands firmly on her hips, tense, ready to defend her position to the last. Even the slight blush that flashed on her cheekbones betrayed the emotions that were boiling inside. Lucas watched her silently, giving her the opportunity to speak. He saw in front of him not just an irritated woman, but a person accustomed to controlling the situation and fighting for his space. Her confidence was part of her nature, like that defiant look, which read a warning, "Don't try to argue with me." But he was still going to do it. Raising an eyebrow, Lucas crossed his arms over his chest. "Nice to meet you. Lucas Brady, Security Systems Specialist," he said calmly, but with a slight mockery in his voice, watching as she narrowed her eyes, as if assessing him anew. "And by the way, I wasn't hired to spy on you. I'm here because your father wants to protect this house." "Yeah, of course," she snorted, folding her arms over her chest. "And the cameras in my bedroom are also for security, right?" "Cameras in the bedroom." He shook his head, not hiding his grin. "I'm in the business of protecting against threats, not creating a reality show. And you know, I could just turn around and leave. But I like to see people jump to conclusions." She squinted, looking at him carefully, as if trying to read his thoughts, scan him with her gaze, find in him even the slightest shadow of insincerity. Her green eyes sparkled, and her lips pursed slightly, a classic gesture of a person accustomed to keeping the situation under control. "You're too self-confident," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. Lucas wasn't embarrassed. On the contrary, a slight smirk touched his lips. "And you're too suspicious," he retorted calmly, holding her gaze. For some time, they simply looked at each other, as if waging an unspoken battle. Neither of them wanted to be the first to look away. Neither of them was going to give in. There was a tension between them, dense, palpable, but not at all hostile. This was something else. Lucas saw it in her gaze, that spark that flared for just a moment before she could hide it. But he noticed. And it seems she felt it too. A barely noticeable smile flashed at the corners of her lips, tiny, almost imperceptible, but still real. She did not yield, but no longer looked as if she was ready to throw him out of the house for the very fact of his presence. "Okay, Mr. Brady," she finally said, tilting her head slightly to the side. Her voice became softer, but there was still a warning in it. "Let's see what you can offer." She took a step back, but before turning around, she added in a lower voice, "But if I notice even one hidden camera in my bathroom, you'll be out of here faster than you can blink." Lucas grinned, feeling that this job would be much more interesting than he expected. Lucas stood at the altar, slightly adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo. The thin fabric fit him perfectly, emphasizing his silhouette, but he hardly noticed it. At this moment, clothes, music, the noise of voices, everything became unimportant. Around him is a shining hall, filled with light and laughter. Hundreds of guests in elegant outfits, shimmering in the light of the chandeliers. Luxurious snow-white compositions of lilies and roses filled the space with their sophisticated aroma, mixing with light notes of expensive champagne. The air was saturated with a feeling of celebration, a moment that will be remembered for a lifetime. The orchestra played a gentle melody, its sound softly scattered throughout the hall, reflected in the glasses of sparkling wine. The tables, set with impeccable taste, were bathed in the light of candles, flickering with a warm golden glow. People smiled, whispered, someone secretly wiped away tears of joy, but Lucas no longer cared. Because he noticed only one thing her. Sabrina Harrington, now almost Sabrina Brady, walked slowly down the aisle towards him, her light lace dress shimmering in the light of the chandeliers, cascading across the floor in a cascade of delicate folds, like the iridescent foam of the sea, softly hugging the shore. Thin, exquisite lace covered her shoulders, following the curves of her body, and a long train followed her like a light cloud, barely touching the floor, as if woven from moonlight. Each step she took was like the smooth movement of the wind, carrying the first petals of spring flowers graceful, confident, but at the same time filled with some kind of tremulous elusiveness. The golden light of candles and chandeliers was reflected in her hair, neatly styled, but with a couple of stray strands that gently framed her face, as if the artist had left a few living, natural strokes on the portrait. A thin chain with a tiny pendant glittered around her neck, the same one that he had given her once, on one of those warm evenings when they wandered along the shore, laughing. In her hands she held a bouquet of white peonies and soft pink roses. Their petals, like velvet, echoed the tenderness of her skin, illuminated with a light blush. Her eyes, sparkling, deep, piercing, were full of that same daring fire that he saw in them for the first time. Then she stood at the gate of her house, holding a dagger in front of her, resolutely squeezing it in her thin but strong fingers, ready to rush into battle if necessary. She mistook him for a spy, another messenger of her father, who, like everyone else, came to control her life. He remembered how she looked at him, then a withering look, decisive, full of genuine contempt. He chuckled, remembering this moment. Hell, he knew even then. He knew that this girl would become something more for him than just a casual acquaintance or another obstacle. She was fire, a hurricane, that whirlwind that burst into his life, turning everything upside down. And now she was walking towards him not with a weapon in her hands, but with tenderness hidden in the corners of her lips, with a silent oath in her eyes. The music sounded somewhere on the edge of perception, soft chords mixed with the noise of the guests breathing. But for him at that moment, there was only one thing she. Somewhere in the crowd of guests, there was laughter. Someone was whispering. Someone was brushing away a tear of emotion. And suddenly Lucas heard a familiar voice from behind. So, well, where am I supposed to shed tears? He turned around and saw Nick. The old friend stood there in an impeccably fitted suit, wearing the same grin Lucas had known for years. The glass of whiskey swayed easily in his hand, and there was undisguised pleasure in his eyes. "I thought you wouldn't be able to come?" Lucas asked, shaking his friend's hand. "Well, let's just say it's a pleasant surprise," Nick grinned. "In general, I'm here to see the result." "The result?" Nick chuckled and raised his glass to his lips. "Have you thought about how it happened that you received that order? With that same general. Come on, Lucas. I told you that I have useful contacts. I just pushed fate a little." Lucas froze, digesting what he heard, and then suddenly laughed. "Are you saying that this is all a setup?" "No, no, no," Nick made an innocent face. "I just helped speed up the inevitable a little. Well, let's just say, I knew you two needed to meet. Sabrina is stubborn, independent, with character, and that's exactly what you needed to bring you out of your past." Lucas shook his head, still grinning in disbelief. "You're a fucking cunning bastard." "I know," Nick drawled contentedly, clinking his glass with him. "Well, brother, are you ready?" Lucas looked back at Sabrina. She was almost there, and at that moment time seemed to slow down. Her light lace dress fluttered softly with every step, flowing in a cascade of delicate folds, as if woven from morning fog and sunlight. Absolute confidence shone in his eyes, the same one that captivated him from the first day they met. Her lips were touched by a barely noticeable, but such a warm smile, not forced, not shy, but sincere, filled with something more than just joy. Her family walked slowly behind her. The father, tall, stately, with glimpses of gray in his dark hair, looked at his daughter with pride, which was visible in every movement, in every breath. His eyes sparkled as if he was holding back too many emotions, not allowing himself to relax at such an important moment. Her sister, graceful, almost a mirror image of Sabrina, straightened the hem of her dress with slight excitement, carefully removing every fold so that it fell perfectly. Lucas took a deep breath. The excitement that had previously been swirling in his chest suddenly gave way to something completely different, warm, filled with confidence, as if the universe itself was whispering to him, "Everything is correct." He felt it with every cell of his being, with every thought, with every heartbeat. He nodded. Ready. Somewhere a wedding march began to play. The solemn chords piercing the air merged with the rustling of fabrics, with the muffled noise of the crowd, with the quiet signs of relatives. Sabrina came closer. Her steps were leisurely, but firm, as if she was walking not just towards him, but into a new life, into a destiny that was now inextricably linked with his own. And then her fingers, light, warm, trembling with barely noticeable excitement, touched his hand. Lucas squeezed her hand, absorbing the touch, realizing how precious it was. At that moment he realized, yes, he did everything right. All the decisions, all the doubts, all the difficulties they went through brought them here. Life was just beginning. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.